What's going on? Thank you so much for tuning into the TheFailedPodcast. I am your host, Sam Esquivel. Here we are again, knocking out another episode, and I'm hoping that you have been keeping up with our content and our previous interviews. Our goal here is to bring something of quality that can kind of teach you something from the basis of failure and challenges. I forgot I was recording for the YouTube channel. I'm looking this way. There you go. What's up, guys? Thank you. We do this on two platforms. We do it for audio and we do it for YouTube. The descriptions are below, and so that's why I'll say and do some stuff that works on video, but not necessarily for audio. But I forget, but it's all good. We want to encourage you to keep on going no matter what failures and challenges that you have. And the way that we do that is by bringing people in that talk about their failures and challenges and what they did to overcome it so that we can all learn from it. And so today we have a great guest. Rick Faletti is in the house.
Yo, what's up?
How you doing, man?
How's it going, everybody?
Yeah, you're doing good. You're a pro, man. A while ago I was trying to goof around and ask you if about the interview thing, and you've been in broadcasting, you've been in front of a mic for many reasons in different ways, so it kind of puts me at ease because this is going to be easy work, you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
And so Rick, thank you for joining us here on the TheFailedPodcast. I'm not sure if you've heard, I'm not putting you on the spot, it kind of sounds like it's funny, but I'm not sure if you've heard any of the previous episodes. Have you?
I have. Yep. I've listened to a few of them.
Okay, good. So you kind of get the vibe. It's very simple. All I'm doing is telling your story. And I know a little bit about you. Me and my wife have had the privilege to meet you and your family. Lovely family, baby Johnny. What's up, man? And so that's his son. He's my boy. Anyways, and so we've talked, and you've got some depth, man, and you got good energy. You got good vibes, and man, you've been good to me, man. I've enjoyed every conversation that we've had off of the mic, and that's what made me think. I was like, man, I gotta have him on because just our, barbecue conversations and stuff have been really good. You have a lot of wisdom inside of you that you've given to me just in regular talking. So I was like, I gotta have Rick on, man. He's got to share. I gotta know where this Rick was developed and made, man, because you got a lot of energy, and it's positive energy.
Yeah, I mean, especially from a background where I come from, and I'll tell you a little bit about myself here in a minute, but there's two choices. You can look at things in one way and say, I'm going to let things that have happened to me negatively affect me and take me down. Or I can choose to rise above it and learn from things. Yeah. And that's really ultimately what my story is rising above.
So in order to tell your story, I always like to start from the beginning, but it's not like I was born and the weather was. No, it's not from that perspective. How far back can you go back in your life when you were young and you remember, man, this is tough? Or these challenges, why am I going through them as a kid or with your family? Take us back to what one way back that you can think of, and then we'll go ahead and
yeah. I mean, the challenges started right away. My dad died when I was 8 months old.
Wow.
So right away, the deck was stacked a little bit against me.
Yeah.
My mother has had her mental health challenges, substance challenges in her life, especially when I was younger.
Wow.
I can remember a specific situation of when my mother was battling her addiction and coming home from church and mom not waking up when I go to shake her and wake her up. And that was trauma that happened at a young age. That's just one situation.
Yeah.
There's more situations like that. So that sort of trauma starts very young for me.
So we talk about challenges, and I'm not trying to belittle or glorify anybody's challenges, but man, those two, losing your father and before you even got to know him, and then the stuff that your mom went through. I mean, those are challenges that can produce a lot of negativity in someone. We'll start with your dad a little bit, and then we'll jump into your mom's and the impact of your journey. But with your dad, when did you realize, at what age did you realize, man, when did you start saying, I wish my dad was here?
Well, it took a little bit longer because my mom remarried, and I had a stepdad, and my sister told me later on in life that they wanted me to think that he was my real dad.
Got it.
So they didn't talk about my real dad until I was a little bit older. So it took me a little while. Probably I was maybe 7 to 10 years old when I really started to realize, man, I kind of got the shaft on the whole dad thing. My stepdad was not a loving, caring type person.
Yeah.
It was more of an abusive, verbally abusive, kind of, he was a partier. They went out and did their thing, and I kind of got, left behind from the whole teaching aspect of being a child. But whenever I started seeing, young men, boys playing catch with their dad, or their dad was there for them at football practice, or whatever the case may be, and then I started realizing, well, man, I don't have that.
Yeah.
And then I started falling into that trap of poor me, like,
Oh, yeah.
I
mean, failure and challenges have a way of causing people to say that and reflect on life from that perspective. How long did that happen, and how did it show up? And the reason I'm asking is because sometimes we don't overcome failures because we're too busy saying, woe me, poor me, that you don't get back on the track and start making the adjustments so that you can accomplish what you set out to. And so sometimes we spend too much time in front of the mirror just like blaming and looking at myself, at ourselves. How long did that last for you? Because that's a deep impact that had on you.
Honestly, for a long time.
Yeah.
It impacted me for a long time. Only probably into my early to mid 30s did I fully start to resolve those concerns.
Yeah.
It took a long time.
And then for you and your mom, as far as our relationship goes, not only were you in essence like in the home, and then you're a male and she's dealing with the issues that she's dealing with, what did those challenges create in you? Like, was there a lot of resentment? Were you wanting to help your mom, or did you make yourself like numb to the situation?
So I was what they call the hero child. Like, I wanted to make everybody happy. So I was involved in choir and football and basketball and baseball and everything that I could find to try to make people happy. And there's something called the child of an alcoholic, and they have different categories for them. So I fit into that hero child where I was trying to make everybody happy. But later on in life, I started to resent my mom for it, which was very unhealthy because, as much as the mistakes that she made, she tried with the mentality that she had the best she could. She was a great mom in a lot of ways. Not a great mom in some other ways, but I love her very much. There were some things that I did resent. I've worked through that. There are some challenges that her and I still have to this day. Not any resentment issues, but just some challenges that we still have in our relationship. And but as I've come to say, my path to becoming me that I've been through, I wouldn't be the same person that I am today if I didn't go through those challenges.
A lot of people deal with like failures when it comes to their parents. Like, they either fight with them, they cut them off, and then I talk to friends and they're like, I don't talk to my mom, and I hate my dad, I hate my mom. They say things like this, and it's just so sad because our parents are just like us. They're individuals learning and having to go through a world that we're going through the world as well. And so I feel like, a positive note that I want to put out there, if you're watching this and you do have a resentment and negativity towards your folks, and that is that it's a challenge to have parents, but don't let it turn into a fail based on how you respond to it. So when did you begin to change your response towards your mom, or the way that you were going to grow up as a man? Even if maybe you didn't have the examples in the home, where did you start drawing them out from, and when did you finally start coming out of that?
When I met my wife. She changed my mentality on everything, because she loved me unconditionally, and she helped me to see that love. And I'd had previous relationships and stuff like that, just like everybody else. But the loyalty that I got from her helped me to be a better person. And overall, the resentment, I realized that it hate and resentment only hurt the container that they're contained in. It's like acid. It eats away at your soul.
Yeah.
So if we hold on to that resentment, and if we allow that to control our thought process and to impact our decision making, we are going to erode our lives away. And so I made a decision to drop that resentment.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that you're not going to have thoughts that creep up from time to time. But and like anybody that's watching or listening, if you feel that you have that, resentment, there is probably a valid reason for that.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that you still have to have those feelings. You can rise above it. You can let that stuff go and truly be who you were meant to be. And that's why I love what we're doing here with this Failed Podcast, because life is all about failures and overcoming the failures. We were talking about this pre-show. You can't have success without failures. I wouldn't be the person that I am today if it wasn't for the failures that I went through. I wouldn't have the care that I have for people if I wouldn't have gone through what I went through.
Man, when I hear you say that, you have to come to a point where you say, I am changing my direction. Like, I am not going on the direction that stems from my past, that stems from what I've been through. I'm changing, and it's based on new principles. It's based on something new that I have learned, or something that I have heard of and I want to experience. When did you make that shift? When did you start getting out? Obviously, your past made you, but then you started aiming for something else that was going to set you up for a new type of life, a new family environment in the future. Where did that shift happen, and where did it come from?
So in my early 20s, I was in college, and I was a very depressed individual. But it was all on the inside. I put this macho...
So the hero kid thing
I still had the hero kid thing, but inside I was a hurting individual. And I turned to drugs. And I started going to the clubs and, numbing myself to the real issues. So that carried on into my mid-20s.
Yeah.
And then about 28, 27, I was like, what am I doing here? What's going on?
Yeah.
Is this really what I want? Is just to waste away? What sort of impact am I going to have on this world? And that's where it all shifted when I started to realize that there was a greater purpose for this suffering. There was a greater purpose for the pain that I went through, for all the failures that I had been through. And let me say, it wasn't all because of other people. I committed a lot of my own failures.
Got it.
Like in my 20s, making very poor decisions, doing drugs, going out, acting like a dang fool, and doing things that I don't need to be doing.
Yeah.
And getting me in trouble.
Now we're connecting with a lot of people right now. I can hear them like putting the volume up. Yeah, imagine how many people have been through that. Let me jump back a little bit. And you were hiding it behind being busy, right?
Yep.
And behind drugs. Sometimes we hide behind something, or we don't want to face our reality, so we go down a path, and that path lasts a long time. What are some things that you would tell someone to help them come to those terms and say, you know what, I am hiding behind this right now, as to avoid a long stretch? Now, for you, it was several years, and you came to that realization, but for some, they get stuck there. And 20 years will pass, 30 years will pass, and then they'll wake up one day and say, what have I done?
Right.
How can we shorten that from, looking back now?
Well, first thing I would say is that it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to not feel good. And, they often say no pain, no gain. You've got to go through the pain. You've got to go through the hurt in order to get through the hurt. Right? Because ultimately we want to get through it.
Yeah.
We can't get through it if we don't go through it. And at the end of the day, that's what I finally allowed myself to do, was to deal with the issues. to understand that you can't just keep sweeping it under the rug and expect the dirt to go away. The dirt's just going to keep piling up under the rug, and now you're left with a big, huge mound under the rug, and people are tripping over the door trying to get into your house because they're tripping all over your baggage. And at the end of the day, you can't be who you are destined to be. Until you deal with the things in your life that you need to deal with, or that we need to deal with on a personal level.
That's resonating with someone, and they might be saying, you know what, I want to deal with it, but how? Now, what physically did you begin to do? What specific things did you begin to do along that path?
So for me, it's a multifaceted approach. Exercise is very, very helpful. Meditation is huge. Mindfulness. Getting inside of your body and listening to what's going on. And I know that sounds crazy. How do I listen to my body? But you're feeling, when you're doing a mindfulness meditation, you're focusing on your breathing. You're thinking about how does your feet feel on the floor? How does my rear end feel on this couch right now? And what that does is it shifts your mind away from your brain to your body. So the brain fools us into thinking all of these thoughts are who we are. These thoughts of craziness up here and people can probably relate with this. You think a thought and you're like, what was that? That's not me.
Oh, yeah.
That's not who you are. That's a crazy thought in your brain that you need to pay no attention to, and you just need to flush it out of your brain and realize that's not who you are. Who you are is what's going on with your body right now and being in tune with that. So mindfulness, exercise, and finally accepting my past and who I am.
I like to tell people that in order to accept a failure or a challenge that you've been through that you're trying to overcome, you have to identify it. And when you identify it, it's you do it in a very simple manner in order for you to be able to move past it. Because more complicated you try to make it, it's hard to just simplify it or to come to terms with it. So how did you describe it and say, this is what I went through, this is what it did to me, and this is how I want to overcome it? And the reason I ask is because I want people to learn how to identify their failure in order to begin to grow out of it. Or fails and challenges in life.
It really all comes down to just a self-searching, right? So you've got to be able to look inside yourself and realize the hurts and the pains and the failures that are affecting you. And sometimes what we do is we tend to push that stuff down. You know, like if we didn't get along with our parents, or we're upset with we didn't get that break that we were looking for. Right? We didn't get the job, or the girlfriend that I love, she left me, or whatever the case may be. We'll push that stuff down, and instead of dealing with it, we allow it to fester inside of us. So for me, and I had a lot of those heartaches and breakups and failures and things of that nature. But if I wasn't learning from those, and if I wasn't educating myself as to why I made the mistakes, why I had the failure, then I can't prevent it in the future. That's why, to me, history is one of the most important subjects in all of school, because if we don't recognize the past, we're bound to repeat the same mistakes.
Oh, man. That's a big statement right now in the culture that we're living in, because history is so important. But the key is the proper history told the proper way. And who better to understand our own history than ourselves? And so I really like that. And so, okay, we're gonna focus on you in kind of your past, and then a little bit of your family. Then we're gonna jump into Rick now. Okay, so tell me how all that stuff from your past and everything that you hated, loved, learned from it. What changes are you making now for your kids and your wife, so that when they're 20 or 30, they're saying something different that you wish you would have been able to say?
The biggest thing, if you have a young child, or if you are a young person listening to this, you have to understand that failure is a part of life. And I was explaining this to my daughter about Thomas Edison and the light bulb. And I'm sure that you've told this with other people in the past.
I don't use the story anymore because I've used it.
You've used it so many times,
but
right?
I love it. Continue, please.
But how many times did he fail before he made the light bulb? Everybody knows the story. I mean, over thousands and thousands of times, and now we got light bulbs all over in every part of the world. If he wouldn't have had all those failures, he wouldn't have continued to grow and continued to pursue his dream of making the light bulb. So whatever the case may be, if you want to be a doctor, or if you want to be a singer, you want to try out for The Voice, whatever the case, just because somebody says no doesn't mean that's your story. That's the end of your story. You keep going. You keep striving until you get the result that you want.
And when we fail, that isn't a no. That's a need to know. It's not a no. It's time to get to know. And so that's, people fail, and then that's it. That's also the end of what they were dreaming, of what they were chasing. And man, that bums me out, man, because when you're young, you get a lot of failures in life that aren't your fault, your parents or where you live and the school that you were at. And I just want like young people to quit turning off their dreams because they failed at the beginning part of the dream. You know what I mean? And it's so I want to encourage young people watching, or parents, if you're watching this, tell your young person, tell your young kids, man, hey, you're going to fail. Just don't quit. And it's the quitting part that really defines failure, man. If you quit, then you have totally failed. Right. But if you don't, then you're still going.
You're still going.
You still got a chance. And so, the Edison thing, I love it, bro. Like, it's such a good example of trying over and over and over. And if I had to add a little info on top of that example, and that is that there was people around him that didn't believe in the light bulb. I mean, that's like,
true, right?
So sometimes we just lack visionaries in our lives to help us come out of the failure. I think it's important to have people that can dream.
And
with you.
I think the one of the best things that you just put in is when you are doing something that you truly believe in, there are going to be people who say, why are you doing that? Why would you ever think that's a good idea? I remember when I started my business in 2018, and I may be jumping ahead here, but my own mother said, what are you doing, you stupid idiot? Why would you do this? Why would you quit your job? Why would you go out and put yourself out there?
Oh, man.
And that was just fuel for me. It didn't deter me. It made me more motivated. Like, I wanted to prove people wrong. I wanted to show that I'm right. I prove myself right rather than prove them wrong.
Yeah, dude. So that's perfect, man. Okay, so you start talking about you're transitioning from a corporate stability and all that at your job, and then you start your own business, and that's where your mom, maybe the generational gap there. Older people don't understand. A lot of older people don't understand what it is to be an entrepreneur, to step out and do something on your own. It's just too risky.
Right.
So I think my parents would have told me the same thing. As a matter of fact, they don't even know how my job or how I generate income, and it's very stressful. If I don't work, I don't get paid. It's as simple as that. And so it's a tough thing for people to understand. So, and obviously a lot of people right now are encouraged by the word entrepreneurship. They're encouraged by doing their own thing. It seems like this culture right now is really open to it. And so I think that you're going to be able to connect with them by this part as we start sharing about what you did as a job, because I think it has a real close connection to failure and not failing per se. So let's talk a little bit about what you did and how it relates to failure, and then we'll start digging in a little bit more.
So I got a degree in 2004 from Southeastern Oklahoma State in occupational safety and health. So the reason I chose that degree is because I was going to be a professional pilot. and I was going to be, I don't think you know this story, but I was going to be a commercial pilot. That's why I went to that school. And turned out that I had really bad motion sickness.
Oh, no.
Not so good for a commercial pilot.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, quick story, I was on a flight one day, and it was a very, very hot summer day, and it was really bumpy, and I'm in a Cessna 150, which is a tiny little aircraft. And I'm flying from Durant, Oklahoma to Lubbock, Texas. And along the way, I start through a pocket of turbulence, and I'm just bouncing around all over the place, and I start to get motion sickness. And when you get it real bad, your vision starts coming in and in and closing in. I had to make an emergency landing. So at that point...
You were flying?
I was flying. I was by myself in the airplane.
Oh, no.
So at that point, I realized... I probably need to make a career change. I can't do this for a living because I can't fly hundreds of people around and then potentially pass out. So long story short, I made a change to occupational safety and health. Now, a lot of people may be thinking, what the heck does that mean?
Yeah, we'll get into that in a minute. I want to focus on you wanting to be a pilot. Being a pilot, it's like whenever you're a kid and they ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a firefighter. I want to be an astronaut. It kind of falls under that category. It is like the ultimate dream for kids to be able to fly and fly a plane.
It's so cool.
And you wanting to do that, and your energy and your mind going in that direction. And then you have this physical reaction to it that's going to force you to not go down that reaction. For a lot of people, that challenge is so hard on the mind because it's like if your identity is tied up in it, if you had already told people this is what I'm going to do, and you're having to shift, they don't, not that they don't believe why you shifted, but people will end up thinking, oh, he didn't make it. He didn't make the cut.
Yeah.
How did you have to deal with that? I'm going to use the word disappointment, but it's not disappointment, but that shift.
It was a disappointment.
From wanting to do that and then choosing something else and continuing. Dude, I would have been so bummed out.
It was disappointing. I mean, I wanted to be a commercial pilot.
Yeah.
The one thing, and this is terrible, but 9/11 happened like right around the same time. And the airline industry was taking a huge hit. So it really made my decision a lot easier. But it was still disappointing, and it was still, as some could say, it could be considered as a failure because I didn't make it, right? I wasn't able to make the cut. But at the end of the day, that's not what defines who I am being a pilot. What defines who I am is my goals and my aspirations and achieving my goals and aspirations. So my goals and aspirations shifted. But I still love to fly to this day. I still do some flying, and so it's still a passion of mine, but I just don't do it professionally.
Is it like those little planes that are outside the grocery store, like you put a quarter? so if you get motion sickness, you're not too far from the
So long story short, I had a neck surgery in 2018, and it turns out that was one of the main sources. I had a pinched nerve in my neck. So when I was a kid, I had a lot of trauma. I told you about my mom put me on Ritalin, thinking I had ADHD, and it caused me to have a severe tic where I would fling my neck around like this. I got made fun of at school like you couldn't imagine, and so that caused a lot of neck problems. So in 2018, I ended up having a surgery. I had an accident. I got rear-ended in 2016, which made it worse. And then in 2018, I had to have a surgery to have that fixed. But when they fixed it, some of the nausea and dizziness went away. So a lot of that was tied to those neck problems, which they didn't find out about till a lot later.
Well, let's get on a plane.
Let's do it. Let's go.
No, and so, dude, oh my gosh. The tick. You used the word tick. Okay, I'm going to expand on it a little bit. I feel like it just, okay, your tick caused you had this reaction that people made fun of because it's easy. What people see is what they pick at. Like, if you're short, if you're this, if you're that color, if your hair, if your shoes, if you're poor, if you're black, whatever. Those are all ticks per se.
Right.
I'm trying to make a connection here.
No, absolutely.
So you had that challenge. Dude, I'm talking about, okay, I hate bullying. This is a public service announcement about bullying and how bad it is and how easy it is to pick on that tick. So you went through it. There's kids right now, they're being bullied for dumb stuff, man. And I mean, they don't even want to go to school. They're probably smart, but they're not even they can't even be smart because they're scared.
Right.
Or because they're hurt. How did you deal with that tick? How did you deal with that bullying at that time? What effects do you look back and you're like, man, I hate that I had that tick and it made this of me.
Yeah.
But reflecting on it, you're better for it now. But what did it do for you? What did you learn from it? And I'm going back. I'm
glad we're going over this. I had very low self-esteem because of it. I mean, you talk about a person with no confidence.
Yeah. I mean, that's a hard thing to walk around with.
I mean, and the fact that, I didn't have the friends, I didn't have the social status, and that stuff is important to young people. They want to feel involved. They want to feel like that they're loved, and ultimately, when you have that rejection, which ultimately that's what it is when people make fun of you, it's a rejection of your color of your skin or your weight on the scale, or whether it's like I said, a physical issue that you're dealing with. They're all rejections. And that stuff hurts, and it shaped who I was for a long time. And going back, I didn't have the proper parents to help me deal with that, so it was something that I just had to bottle up. If that's you right now, I would just encourage you to understand that when these people are making fun of you, it's not you. That they're dealing with an insecurity in themselves.
Yeah.
And they don't understand what you're going through. So I want to encourage you to not give up. Yeah. To not let that be who you are in defining moment.
And I just hate that things like that lead to fails. They put limits on young people. They put limits on the future and the potentials that they're going to have because someone is deciding to pick on something that's out of their control. And so I just want you to keep your head up, man. If you got a tick, if you got something, if you look a certain way and someone is picking on that, that's a sign that you need to be stronger in that area, because I do not want that to lead to fail. And it does for many people. And it makes me happy to know you and to see some of your success and see you as an individual that I can sit here and say, man, you overcame that. Because there's people that you can see it well into their later ages as they get older. It's very present, the damage that came from bullying.
Yeah.
And so, okay, now you're doing business, and you can't fly. So you were going to describe what the area of study that you changed to.
So it's occupational safety and health. So you may have heard of OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. We help people to avoid risk on the job. So people that get hurt or injured or they get sick by a chemical. So that's really what I focused on. I went to work for NASA at the Johnson Space Center. I've worked for ExxonMobil. I've worked for energy companies, and I jumped around about every 2 years. And at that time that was kind of frowned upon. But my mentality is that I would go until I felt like I could make no more difference. So once I felt like my touch or my how I can impact people was removed, or had reached its full potential, I would go somewhere else.
You like challenging yourself.
I like challenging myself, and I like being able to get a wide, broad perspective of what the industry is. And that has carried over to my life as well. So whenever now my company is focused on not just the physical risk of employees, but also the mental risk. We are the most overworked society in the modern world, in the Western world. We work tremendous amount of hours. We have a lot of stress. There's something called input overload now. Your cell phone's constantly dinging. You get emails. They expect you to answer within 5 minutes.
Yeah.
They send a text message. It says seen. If you don't respond right away, now they think that you're ignoring them. There's a lot of things that we have to deal with now, especially young people, with all of the social medias and everything. And bullying has extended now to you don't even have to be at school anymore.
Yeah.
You could be at home and being bullied on social media. So I feel for the younger generation. But anyways, the reason I was telling you this is because my company, I've focused on the mental health aspect and how to make a difference in people's lives.
Yeah.
And ultimately, my goal is to become an inspirational and motivational speaker to make an impact on generations, to help them understand that, I'm successful and I have a family and we've got money in the bank, but it wasn't always like that.
Yeah.
It required me to step up.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And to overcome my failures. And I told you this earlier, even though I'm a successful businessman and I have successes, I still have failures.
Tell me, okay, so when we're talking about the industry that you're in, there's a lot of failures. You know, my dad is in the construction industry, so growing up, he's always told me about falls and wrecks and people being exhausted and getting burned and there's all these fails that we don't even think about, like that there's things that we can do to avoid them. What are some of the fails that you have seen or that you strategize to help companies or individuals avoid? Because right now you said sensory overload or information overload can cause you to be clumsy physically.
Yeah.
And then bad things can happen. So is there a story of failures that you've seen and you put focus on so that you can help individuals avoid it?
I'll give you one specific instance. A company that I'm working with right now. So they have approximately 1,000 employees. Okay. Last year, they injured 100 people.
Wow.
So 1/10 of their workforce was injured last year on the job.
That's a lot.
That's a lot of failures.
Yeah.
Right? And what it boiled down to was a lack of involvement with the management and employees together. So management were telling the employees what to do without any input whatsoever from the employees. And if you're a child or a teenager, this can be frustrating as well when your parents telling you what to do over and over.
You're giving these young people ammo to. No, I'm joking.
Yeah, but I mean, in reality, everyone wants to feel like they have skin in the game, right?
Yeah.
Everyone wants to feel like their voice is heard.
Got it.
You know, and as a young person, that can be frustrating when your parent is just telling you over and over and over what to do, and you don't feel like they're listening to you.
Yeah.
So what I would encourage those young people to do is to be honest with their parents and say, hey, listen, I just don't feel like you're listening to me.
Yeah.
I don't feel like my voice is heard. And let that just kind of fester for a minute and let your parent think about it.
Now that's a challenge. Okay, so looking at it from the industry's perspective, as well as young people with a father or kid environment or home environment, just the confidence to say it is difficult. There's a reason why management was telling the workforce do this, blah blah blah, and then they wouldn't. Their voice wasn't in the game,
right?
Because they didn't have the confidence to say it.
Correct.
Or let alone the communication skills to say, depending on the type of workforce. I'm not knocking on no one. I just want to point this out because I wanted to ask you, how do you bring that conversation up? What's a strategic way to say, wait, I can't necessarily do that when you're talking to a person of authority, someone who is your boss, and your job is just to say yes. And sometimes we can avoid failure because we do speak up.
Yeah. It's all about respect. You don't go in it to belittle or to say that what they're saying isn't important.
Yeah.
It's all about respect, in your approach.
Yeah.
Hey, like for instance at the company, if the boss had asked the employee to do something, the employee doesn't quite understand why we can't do it another way. Maybe the employee goes up and says, "Hey, listen, I don't want to rub anybody the wrong way, but I'm doing this every single day, and I've noticed that there's a better way to do this. Could you, maybe let me show you how that would work?"
There was a fail that I'm aware of. There was an individual who's an electrician, and they're dealing with big electrical things that you have to walk into. And so that he was talking to me about a shut-off system and process and tagging.
Lockout, tag out, and all that.
Yeah. So he had asked someone told him, I tagged you out, whatever. He didn't do it. He trusted the other guy, so he already failed there.
Right.
So then there was an individual inside of the box. He went to go either, I forgot what it was, to turn the power on or off, whatever. And it almost killed the guy, right?
Yeah.
It threw him, and luckily he was able to be thrown out instead of staying between the walls. The reason I bring this up is because that fell, it hurt him for a long time. I mean, it missed with his head.
Mm-hmm.
And you were mentioning that not only are you trying to systematically avoid failures, but you're also doing it from a mental perspective.
Right.
So that fail affected him more mentally than, because everyone else ended up being okay. But how are you using the headspace? How are you focusing on the headspace whenever it comes to dealing with real fail, but overcoming that fail, even though it may exist?
Something tells me to say, when I'm talking about physical safety, we're all responsible for our own personal safety.
Yes.
Okay. So from a physical standpoint, if you're in an environment that you don't feel safe, you have every right to speak up and say, this is not safe. I don't feel safe. I'm not going to do this. So it also relates to the mental side as well. Okay. That's why I love safety teaching, because it correlates so well to the mental aspect. If you're in an environment that you don't feel safe mentally, you have every right to speak up and say, I don't feel safe. And whether that person listens to you or not, that's their reaction. What you do is what is ultimately the most valuable. How do you react? What decisions do you make? What controls do you put into place? What environmental changes do you make? What mental changes do you make? All of that's up to us.
Now, let's say we're talking to young people and they're going to step into their first jobs, and we're trying to help them avoid failure. What are some things that you tell your clients so that they can understand failure and avoid it? Because just understanding it is one thing.
Right.
And what tactics or strategies do you give them so that they can avoid them?
I mean, when it comes to work-related failures, it's all about, knowing your craft, knowing what you want to do, and things like that. Now, personal failures, sometimes these failures are unavoidable. I mean, you're going to make mistakes. You know, I think what it's all about is minimizing the impact.
Got it.
So if you do make a mistake, we want to make it so it's easily recoverable, because those mistakes or the failures where we perpetuate failure upon failure upon failure, those are harder to recover from, and they take more effort and more time and more mindset. So if we have a failure, and we can identify what the failure is, why did we fail, and then what's the control measure so that I don't have that same reaction again or that same outcome. So one thing that I would encourage people to do is to take a personal inventory of maybe the last 6 months. Look at some failures. Where did you fail? Okay, what was the cause of it? What was the severity of the failure? How bad of a failure was it? And what can I do to put control measures in to make sure that those failures don't happen again? So ultimately, it's about identification of the failure. What was the cause of the failure? And then put those controls in place to prevent those causes from happening.
Okay, so let's just say baby Johnny comes to you and he's 12 years old. And for the past 4 years, he's been practicing piano. And he's been so good. And his instructor's amazing. And then he has his first recital. And at that recital, he's playing and he fails on stage. His mind blanks and he doesn't play the song. Now you're at home. And he says, Dad, I totally failed. And he puts his head down. What are you going to tell him?
Man, that's good. Why are you putting me on the spot like this? This is a good one.
Well, because because I'm thinking of how you grew up and what you do for a living.
Yeah.
And then it finds itself in a real life scenario.
Yeah.
What would you, because it seems like your mind is meant to help people and then come out of failures and challenges. So I'm just curious when it's that emotional, because failure is emotional for people, man. Whenever it happens, you cannot ignore that it hurt them.
Yeah, it hurts.
And their headspace is going to be in a bad spot. So I'm just using your son as an example because I'm curious, what would you tell him?
So first thing that I would do is I would give him a big hug, and I would allow him the space to not be okay.
Yeah.
So
now, hold on. Don't lose your train of thought. Here's fathers. Fathers, if you're watching this, especially like a Latino father who's like macho, I can't hug my kid, I'm going to let my wife take care of him. Yes, I did change my voice to be silly. But you understand how hard that is for some people. There's just, like, even just that emotional, that physical contact that you just mentioned, that's such a big step to helping our kids, our young people with failure. So you give them a hug.
Give him a hug and tell him I love him.
Yeah.
And that I understand how frustrating that this is. You put in all this time and the effort, and unfortunately it didn't work out the way you wanted. And it's okay to identify with that, right? It's okay to not be okay.
Yeah.
What it's not okay is to fester in that. Yeah. And to let that become your reality is I'm a failure.
But Dad, I want to quit.
But
why am I going to put myself on that stage for that level of embarrassment again? I want to quit. I want to play football.
So here's the choice. If you quit right now and you let that be the last thing that you remember for this, you'll never want to play piano ever again. You'll never want to get up on a stage ever again.
Dude, that's good. Don't let the fail be the last thing that you leave on the table.
And I'll tell you, in 2009 I went scuba diving, and I hadn't scuba dived since 2004 when I got certified. It had been 5 years. I was in St. Martin and I was diving, and I was a cocky 25 to 26-year-old dude, and I thought I'm gonna go scuba diving. I don't need any updated lessons. I don't need any refresher training, and I nearly died. Under 100 foot of water.
Oh, man.
So there's this vest that you put on when you're scuba diving called a buoyancy compensator. It fills up with air and it deflates so that when you can come up, and it allows you to have neutral buoyancy in the water. Yeah. So I was filling it up with air. Well, if you rise too high under the water, you can have the nitrogen bends and your lungs can explode.
Yeah, like a balloon.
Like a balloon. And so my vest is filling up with air, and from 100 feet below water, I'm shooting to the surface.
Yeah, it's scary.
Very scary. And what happened was I got so scared. It was supposed to be a 2-dive trip on the boat. After the first dive, I was like, I'm never diving again. There's no way I'm ever getting in the water ever again. I'm a failure. I just screwed this all up. I nearly killed myself. What am I doing?
Yeah.
It gives me chills right now thinking about
scary.
this. So the dive master comes up to me, and he says, you will get back in that water. And I'm like, there's no way I'm getting back in that water. And he says, yes, you will. Basically, I'm going to hold your hand, and I know what you did wrong. And we're going to fix what you did wrong, and this is not going to happen again. Sam, let me tell you, that second dive was amazing.
So your failure, your arrogance, because
arrogance
leads us to failure a lot, because we got like, we're not looking at everything. We're closed off because we think that we know. And so that instance, that challenge, that failure set you up. So when you went back, now you're listening to the instructor. Now you're respecting the equipment. Now you're understanding the gap between this is the last time I scuba dive to now.
Correct.
Things have changed. And so failure makes you more aware of what's going on if you don't quit and you approach it again.
Absolutely. And the one thing that I can say is that failures that we learn from and that we overcome, they carry over in our lives. So now this scuba diving incident, I realized I was cocky, I was arrogant, I thought I knew everything, I don't need to learn anything.
Oh, yeah.
And I nearly died. I nearly killed myself because of my arrogance and because of my lack of understanding, my lack of knowledge. Yeah. And so that carries over with me for life now, is that you can't get too cocky. You can never have enough information. You can never stop learning, because if you stop learning, then you're stopping to live. Living is learning, and learning is living. And as we learn and we live, we go through these failures, and that's what shapes who we are. Ultimately, is how we overcome those failures and put those control measures into place for other areas of our lives.
Sometimes what leads to failure is the speed that we're going in. And you have to be well aware of what speed is necessary for what you're doing. You went too fast. You were trying to go too fast. You didn't go fast enough, man. If you would have, you would have died, right?
Oh, I was hyperventilating 80 feet under the water, thinking I wasn't breathing when I was breathing.
That's scary.
It was scary. And so, a lesson learned from that is to slow down, listen to the experts, take advice, learn.
Learn is the key. I love it. What's the name of your company, if you don't mind sharing?
It's Innovative Safety Solutions.
If you're watching this and you're a business owner and you got to prevent some failures, maybe my man Rick can give you a hand.
MySafetyExperts.com is the website.
There it is. I'll put it in the description below. That way you kind of, he does do this for a living. He understands. His level of understanding is deep. And so I ask all of my guests a few questions about failure. Now, you've answered them, trust me, but this is how you can kind of zoom in. But you've done so good up to now. I've enjoyed everything that you've shared, so thank you for sharing so much of your life. And the first question is this, is how do you, right? We all know that failure has a Webster's dictionary meaning, but how do you define the word failure?
The word failure for me means you weren't able to achieve your goal, or you weren't able to get the outcome that you desired. And so that's one aspect. The other aspect of failure is that you didn't meet your expectations, or you didn't you didn't get the job, or you didn't get the gig, or you didn't get the girl, or whatever. That could all be considered a failure.
What can you do, or what practices do you put in place to avoid failing?
That's a really deep question.
It is, I know.
I'm not scared of failure.
Yeah.
So I don't really try to stop failure per se. Mm-hmm. I'm not afraid to go through failure, because I've had so much failure in my life, but I've had so much success because of the failure, because of the things that I've learned. So the one thing I could say about that is, don't intentionally fail, but don't allow the fail to be an intentional restriction on your life. So, avoid fails through understanding of your background and what you've been through and what you're going through, but don't let failure be an intentional failure of your life.
Yeah. What are two or three things that you've learned from some of the failures and challenges that you've been through?
To never give up. Never stop moving forward. Don't look too far in the past.
Yeah.
Let the past educate you, and let it guide you to making new, more educated decisions, but never, ever, ever stop moving.
Yeah.
And then the third thing that I would say is to put yourself out there.
Yeah.
Don't worry about the failure. The failure is going to come. And I said this earlier. In baseball, if you hit 3 out of 10, you're a Hall of Famer, which means you're failing 70% of the time.
Yeah.
But that 30% makes you a Hall of Famer.
That's crazy. That's crazy when you look at it with those numbers. Rick, thank you so much, man, for coming on the TheFailedPodcast. I really have enjoyed our conversation. It's been a great one. I'm sure that a lot of people are going to listen to this and learn from it. Thank you for your friendship and for all the conversations that we have off the screen or behind, off the mics. And I just want to encourage you, man, keep doing what you're doing. And thank you so much. And I know you got some stuff in the works that's going to come out. And so whenever those things roll out, I want to invite you here again so that we can share it with the Failed Podcast audience, because it's things that are meant to help people. And any project like that, I love and I want to support. And so thank you so much for coming on the Failed Podcast. Thank y'all so much for tuning in and watching or listening. And you know what I always say, you might watch this episode and say, man, Sam, you didn't speak right. You said this wrong, the sound this and the video that. You totally failed, Sam. And you know what I say, it doesn't matter. I'll be back and I'll see you on the next one.